One cold night, a homeless boy's desperate warning stopped a millionaire doctor in his tracks. "Don't drive. Your wife cut the brakes." What followed unraveled secrets, shattered trust, and changed their lives forever. Nathan crouched against the cold stone wall of the busy intersection, his hoodie pulled tight against the biting wind. The dull roar of city traffic echoed around him, but his sharp eyes remained locked on the sleek black luxury car parked just a few feet away. It wasn't the first time he had seen this car, and he knew exactly who it belonged to. Tonight, he would need all the courage he could muster. Dr. Howard emerged from the hospital's revolving doors, exhaustion etched into his face. His tailored suit was slightly rumpled, and his shoulders sagged with the weight of another grueling shift. As an accomplished orthopedic surgeon, he was used to saving lives and carrying responsibilities that most people couldn't imagine. Yet tonight, all he wanted was to go home to his wife, Francisca, and the comfort of their picture-perfect suburban life. He glanced at his car with a faint smile of relief, eager to escape the demands of the day. But as his hand reached for the door handle, a voice cut through the cold night like a blade. "Don't drive." Dr. Howard froze. The words were loud, desperate, and alarmingly close. He turned to see a young boy sprinting toward him, his thin frame barely more than a shadow under the streetlight. "What?" Howard snapped, startled, his keys clutched tightly in his hand. Nathan stopped just short of him, panting, his breath visible in the frosty air. "You can't drive that car. Your wife cut the brakes." For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Dr. Howard's tired brain struggled to process the absurdity of the claim. "Excuse me." His tone was a mix of confusion and irritation. Nathan took a step closer, his ragged hoodie and worn sneakers contrasting starkly with the gleaming car and polished surgeon before him. "I heard her. She was on the phone. She said she'd make it look like an accident." Dr. Howard frowned, his eyes narrowing. "Look, kid, I don't know who you are or what game you're playing, but this is—" "I'm not lying," Nathan interrupted, his voice rising in desperation. "I live near your house. I've seen things. I've heard her talking. Please, don't drive that car." Dr. Howard's instincts as a doctor kicked in. He scrutinized Nathan's face, searching for signs of deception or instability. The boy's eyes were wide, genuine, and filled with an urgency that was impossible to ignore. Still, the accusation was ludicrous. "Francisca. His Francisca." "That's enough," Dr. Howard said firmly. "I don't know what you think you saw, but my wife would never. She doesn't love you anymore." Nathan blurted out, cutting him off. "She said you care more about your patients than her. She wants you gone." The words struck Howard harder than he expected. It wasn't the first time he'd heard that complaint from Francisca, though never with such venom. He hesitated, doubt flickering in his mind. Nathan pressed on, his voice trembling. "You don't have to believe me. Just check. Look at the brakes. If I'm lying, I'll go." Howard stared at him, torn between dismissing this as the ramblings of a troubled kid and the nagging feeling that there might be something to it. Why would a homeless boy go out of his way to stop him? "What's your name?" Howard finally asked, his tone softening slightly. "Nathan," the boy replied, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "Please, just check." Howard let out a long breath, the keys still clutched in his hand. Against every ounce of logic, he stepped back from the car, his gaze flicking between the boy and the vehicle. He knelt beside the car and glanced at the brake lines. Francisca's words from their last argument echoed in his mind. "You don't see me anymore, Howard. You just see work." Could this really be possible? As he reached for the brake line, the sound of heels clicking on pavement drew his attention. He looked up to see Francisca approaching, her face radiant with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice sweet and calm. "Howard, who's this?" The tension in the air was palpable as Nathan took a step back, his eyes darting between the couple. Dr. Howard stood slowly, his gaze fixed on his wife. For the first time in their marriage, he wasn't sure what he saw in her. "It's nothing," Howard said cautiously, his mind racing. "Just a misunderstanding." But deep down, he knew the night had only just begun. "Is that so?" Francisca's gaze flicked to Nathan, her lips curving into a practiced smile. "And who is this young man?" Nathan opened his mouth to speak, but Dr. Howard subtly raised a hand, silencing him. "Just someone passing by," he said, though the doubt in his voice was palpable. Nathan's fists clenched. He knew he didn't have much time. As Francisca took a step closer, her sharp perfume cutting through the frosty air, he blurted out, "I need to talk to you alone." He locked eyes with Dr. Howard, ignoring Francisca's icy glare. "Please." Francisca let out a small, clipped laugh. "Alone?" "Howard, really, this boy is clearly—" "Francisca," Howard interrupted, his voice low but firm. "I'll handle this. Go inside the hospital and wait for me." Her smile faltered for a split second, replaced by something harder to read. Then, with a shrug and a sweet, "Fine, dear," she turned on her heel and disappeared into the hospital, her heels clicking all the way. Dr. Howard turned back to Nathan, his face a mask of skepticism. "All right, kid. Talk." Nathan's chest rose and fell as he steadied his breath. "I've been living near your house," he began, his voice shaking. "I sleep in the alley behind your yard. Sometimes I look for food in your trash. I didn't mean to hear anything, but—" His words trailed off as he fidgeted with the strings of his hoodie. "But what?" Dr. Howard pressed, his impatience mingling with unease. Nathan's eyes darted to the car. "I heard her talking on the phone a few nights ago. She was angry. She said you only care about work, that you don't see her anymore. She said she'd make sure you pay." He paused, swallowing hard. "She talked about cutting the brakes, making it look like an accident." The words hung in the air, thick and heavy. Dr. Howard stared at him, his rational mind warring with the gnawing doubt Nathan's story had planted. "You expect me to believe you? That my wife?" His voice cracked slightly, betraying the cracks forming in his confidence. "I saw her," Nathan insisted. "Last night, under your car. She was doing something. I didn't know what it was until I heard her say it again on the phone. She said tonight would be the perfect time." Howard's heart thudded painfully in his chest. The words echoed against the backdrop of recent memories. Francisca's increasingly sharp comments about his long hours, her distant demeanor, the way her smile no longer reached her eyes. "It doesn't make sense," Howard muttered, half to himself. "She's my wife." Nathan leaned forward, his voice desperate. "Just check the brakes. If I'm lying, fine, I'll leave. But if I'm not—" His words faltered, but his gaze was unwavering. Dr. Howard inhaled deeply, trying to steady himself. Francisca's recent accusations about his dedication to work and neglecting her began to take on a new weight. Could her resentment have turned into something darker? Their conversation was cut short as Francisca reappeared, this time with a bright, overly cheerful demeanor. "Howard, let me drive you home," she said, her voice sugary sweet. "You look exhausted." Dr. Howard's jaw tightened. "No, I'll drive," he replied curtly, his mind racing. Francisca's smile flickered again, but she recovered quickly. "Suit yourself. Let's go, then." As she slipped into the passenger seat, Dr. Howard looked back at Nathan. His gaze lingered on the boy, the unease in his chest growing by the second. Something was wrong. He could feel it. Dr. Howard couldn't shake the uneasy knot twisting in his stomach. Nathan's warning replayed in his mind like a broken record. The boy had been adamant, and Francisca's overly sweet demeanor wasn't helping. Something was off. He needed to buy time, but he couldn't outright accuse his wife. Not yet. "I just need to check something before we leave," Dr. Howard said as he opened the driver's side door and gestured for Francisca to wait. "You stay here." Francisca raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a tight smile. Check what? Howard, you're being ridiculous. Humor me, he said curtly, grabbing a flashlight from the glove compartment. He crouched beside the car and peered under it, trying to focus despite the adrenaline rushing through his veins. Nathan edged closer, his voice barely a whisper. Over there, near the wheel. I think that's where she was messing around. Howard adjusted the flashlight, and his heart dropped when he saw it. A clean, sharp cut in the brake line, fresh and deliberate. For a moment, the world around him dimmed. The boy wasn't lying. Francisca leaned out of the passenger side window, her voice laced with mock concern. Howard, is something wrong? Howard's hands tightened around the flashlight. He forced himself to stand, his breaths shallow. I think there's an issue with the brakes, he said, carefully masking his tone. Oh. Francisca stepped out of the car, her heels clicking against the pavement. She crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. I can call for roadside assistance. That won't be necessary, he said. His voice was calm, but inside, he felt like a dam about to burst. He turned to Nathan, who stood frozen, his face pale. Stay close, he whispered to the boy. Francisca took a step closer, her gaze shifting between her husband and Nathan. Her saccharine smile faded, replaced by something colder. You've been talking to him, haven't you? Howard met her eyes, a storm brewing in his own. What's going on, Francisca? She tilted her head, her expression hardening. What do you think is going on, Howard? You're spending your night listening to some street rat instead of trusting me. That's what's going on. Nathan's voice trembled as he spoke up. I saw you. I saw you under the car. You cut the brakes. Francisca's laugh was sharp, almost unhinged. You're basing this on what a homeless boy claims to have seen. Really, Howard? I found the cut, Howard said, his voice firm now. You did this. For a moment, Francisca didn't respond. Then something inside her seemed to snap. Yes, I did, she hissed, her polished veneer cracking. You think I wouldn't? Do you have any idea what it's like to be invisible in your own marriage? To have your husband care more about his patients than his own wife? Howard took a step back, shocked by the venom in her voice. Francisca, I don't. She interrupted, her eyes blazing. Don't you dare pretend to be the victim here. Years, Howard. Years of being ignored while you poured every ounce of yourself into that hospital. Nathan clung to Howard's arm, his eyes wide with fear, but Howard gently pushed him aside, stepping closer to his wife. So what? He asked, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. You thought killing me was the solution. It wasn't supposed to be like this, Francisca said, her voice breaking. I wanted you to see me, to notice me, but you never did. I thought maybe if you were gone, I could finally be free. Howard's chest felt like it was caving in. He wanted to yell, to cry, to shake her and demand an explanation that made sense, but there wasn't one. All he saw before him was a woman he no longer recognized. You could have talked to me, he said finally, his voice low. You could have told me how you felt instead of this. Francisca's shoulders slumped, her fury dissipating into a hollow resignation. Would you have listened, Howard? Would you have cared? Or would it have been another apology followed by another late night at the hospital? Howard stared at her, his throat tight. I'll call the police, Nathan whispered, but Howard stopped him. No, he said quietly. This isn't over yet. Francisca's head shot up, her eyes narrowing. What do you mean? Howard swallowed hard. You need help, Francisca. Real help. And I'm going to make sure you get it. The weight of Francisca's words settled heavily on Dr. Howard's chest. Her anger and bitterness, sharp as they were, spoke of years of unaddressed pain. He couldn't deny her feelings, nor could he justify the horrific action she had taken to resolve them. For a long moment, he stood silently, gazing at the woman he had once promised to cherish, wondering how things had gone so wrong. Finally, he sighed, his voice calm but resolute. "Francisca, we can't keep living like this. You need help. We both do. Therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. But things have to change." Francisca's composure shattered. She sank to the ground, sobbing into her hands. The vulnerability in her cries was raw, stripped of all the practiced elegance she wore like armor. "I didn't want to hurt you," she choked out between sobs. "I just wanted you to see me. To see us." Dr. Howard knelt beside her, his expression softening despite the ache in his heart. "I see you now," he said quietly. "And I want to fix this, but we have to face what's broken first." Standing a few feet away, Nathan watched the scene unfold, unsure if he should stay or quietly slip away. Dr. Howard noticed him and rose to his feet, brushing himself off. He walked over to the boy, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. "You saved my life tonight, Nathan," Dr. Howard said, his tone warm and sincere. "I owe you more than I can say." Nathan shuffled awkwardly, unused to gratitude or attention. I didn't want you to get hurt," he mumbled. Howard nodded, his grip firm on Nathan's shoulder. "And because of you, I didn't. Thank you." A week later, Nathan woke up in a warm bed for the first time in years. The faint morning light streamed through the curtains of the guest room in the Howard's house, casting a soft glow over the neatly arranged furniture. He blinked, still half expecting to find himself curled up on the cold, hard pavement of the alley he used to call home. Downstairs, the smell of coffee and eggs filled the air. Dr. Howard, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, greeted Nathan with a small smile as he walked into the kitchen. "Morning, kid," he said. "Grab some breakfast. We leave for school soon." Nathan hesitated, unsure of how to respond to this new reality. The Howards had insisted he stay with them, despite Francisca's initial reservations. While she remained distant, Nathan could sense that her frostiness wasn't directed at him. Dr. Howard had stood firm, ensuring Nathan felt safe and welcome. Later, as Dr. Howard drove Nathan to school, the boy sat quietly in the passenger seat, clutching the straps of his new backpack. The road stretched out before them, the same road Dr. Howard might have taken that fateful night if Nathan hadn't intervened. "You okay?" Dr. Howard asked, glancing at Nathan as they stopped at a red light. Nathan nodded slowly. "Yeah, it's just different. Good, but different." Dr. Howard smiled faintly, gripping the steering wheel. "Different can be good," he said. "Sometimes it's exactly what we need." As the car rolled into the school parking lot, Nathan turned to Dr. Howard. "Do you think things will be okay with her? With Francisca?" Howard paused, considering the question. "I think it'll take time," he admitted. "But I believe we can make it work, just like you took a chance on me. I'm taking a chance on her." Nathan gave a small nod, stepping out of the car with a newfound confidence. For the first time in years, he felt like he belonged somewhere. As Dr. Howard watched him walk into the school, he couldn't help but reflect on how one desperate warning had changed everything. The road ahead wasn't easy, but it was a second chance for all of them. And that, he realized, was a gift worth fighting for. A job well done. When Dr. Howard's wife found out about the homeless boy around her yard, she needed to save her marriage, and any means possible was feasible. She didn't relent but acted fast and employed the young boy. After her trial separation, she opened up fully, and they lived happily ever after, adopting Nathan formally. Did you enjoy this story? What are your thoughts? Please engage in the comment and endeavor to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.